Emily shared a calendar with us, which is the Gorge calendar. And here, let me see if I can pull it up because I think it's really cool. So gratitude, the daily three that she encourages us to do. And she talked a little bit about it during the welcome, but gratitude, acts of kindness, and moments of silence, which I love because moments of silence is the part where we get to integrate the other parts that we did. And so for me, when I think about what it means to be compassionate, gratitude, and it all starts with you. Gratitude for self. I'm so grateful. Thank you, body, for carrying me through this life. Even if you don't have time or the ability one day to like tell somebody else a gratitude or be grateful, you can always thank your body. Your body, even if it doesn't work 100% of the time, it is still working for you. There's so many things, so many systems, so much complexity to our human body that allows us to just be alive. And that is something that I work on being grateful for every day, because what I used to do was be like, oh, I'm so fill in the blank criticism of myself. That got really old. I got really sick of that. And so gratitude's acts of kindness and moments of silence. So acts of kindness, again, it starts with you. The kinder you are to yourself, the easier it is to be kind to others. The nicer you are to yourself, the nicer you talk to yourself. Have you ever met somebody who was like really happy, who was a jerk? It like never happens. Like somebody who's like super happy in the world, they're just like effervescent. They're bubbling over with happiness. They likely were compassionate to themselves. They loved themselves. They had good communication, which allowed them to have connection and led to happiness, which means they're probably successful. People who are really genuinely happy and they have achieved some level of success on their own terms, genuinely are kind to others, because it's easy to be kind when you're being nice to yourself inside your own head. Okay. So I want to show you one more slide. And then I want to ask you some questions. See what's landing for you. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to sharing. Okay, share and then play. Okay. So compassion leads us to, it's not about what you're doing, it's about who you're being along the way. Who you're being along the way, right? Because doing is only going to take you so far. Who you're being. When people are lying on their deathbeds, they don't wish they worked harder. They wish they had spent more time with their family and friends and pursued their passions. And this is a fact. It's documented. It was researched by hospice nurses. They did this huge surveying of all these people as they were dying. Is this something you would wish? Is this something that you would wish? And this was what people wished. I wish I had spent more time with family and friends. I wish I had pursued my passion. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Right? No matter where you are in life, relationships are the glue of families, effective and profitable working environments, governance, and local and global economies. Relationships. Last week, I did a talk for a company here in Austin who brought me in because the talk was called Grieving Water Cooler Chats. And the reason they were grieving water cooler chats was because most of the business and effectiveness of their work comes from those little connections when they're standing at the water cooler. It's not from the stuff they did at their desk half the time. It's usually about the work they get done when they're walking out the door. Hey, you want to walk to my car? Let them walk out together, go to lunch, sit at the water cooler and talk, go have a snack. Like that's where the magic happens. Aaron's uncle, my husband's uncle, works for Lloyd's of London in London. And he would go over there for like a solid 2 or 3 weeks, even though his family was living in Seattle. And he would go for like 2 or 3 weeks every quarter and just go to the bars with the mates, and he said, I get more business done in those 3 weeks in the quarter by going out like every night with different people from the office so I can really connect. We make more business happen in those 3 weeks of the quarter than the whole rest of the year, the whole rest of the time, because we're making deals when we're together, when we're connecting. And I think that's one of the things that's been so hard about COVID is that we're having to be really resourceful and creative with our connection, right? Because we can't do it in the ways that we used to, which is a grieving experience. Because if you recall, grief is the conflicting feelings that come at the end of a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. And let's face it, 2020, there's not a lot of familiarity here. There's a lot of things that are uncertain, that are not what we've expected. Grief is also a loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. So we're all grieving. And so when it comes to being happy, compassion is the key. And what it means to be happy during a time like now is to be really compassionate with yourself. So instead of saying, gosh, I shouldn't be complaining that we've been living in smoke for weeks. I should feel grateful because some people have had their houses burned down, and I should feel lucky that I don't have a burned down house. Self-compassion sounds like it really sucks that we're living in smoke and that we can't go outside in nature during a time where that was the only thing that was keeping me sane. And I am so devastated for these people who have lost their homes, and I'd like to find a way to take action to help those people also, right? So it's not diminishing your own experience. So my mom died in 2008. She was run over by a car walking across the street. And I would meet people and they'd be like, oh, like, where do your parents live? And I say, oh, my dad's in outside of Houston, and my mom died. And they'd be like, oh, did she have cancer? I'm like, no, she was run over by a car. And they're like, oh my gosh. Like, and they could have lost their mom from being sick, but they always made mine worse. Like, oh my God, that would have been like just so tragic. And it was so tragic. It broke my heart. It is literally why I do what I do in my life, right? It put me on my path. But what was so fascinating is that people would diminish their own experiences to make mine worse than theirs. And I'm like, but yours is important too. Each of our grief experience is unique and valid. And so to be compassionate to ourselves is to acknowledge and validate our own experience as important to us, and to acknowledge and validate that other people's experiences are also valid and important to them. So when we have that self-compassion for our own stories, for our own experiences, we are much more equipped to be kind and gentle with other people when they're having a bad day. Because we're not like, you should feel grateful because at least you fill in the blank thing that you're going to say that isn't going to help them feel better about anything, right? At least you had your mom for 25 years. Yeah, but like, I wanted her for more than that. Like, that doesn't make me feel better, right? So when our kids are like, it's really hard to, not see friends. And instead of being like, oh, other kids aren't even getting food. Like, essentially what we're saying is that your grief, your feelings aren't enough. So what we can do instead to both our children and ourselves is to say, it does suck. I miss seeing friends too. It is hard. And what can we be grateful for? So it's not about taking away anything from anyone else's experience. It's about acknowledging the gravity of ours. And then what that does is it allows for so much more compassion to grow. Because we're like, well, I'm not allowing myself to feel bad, so you can't feel bad either. Right? So anyway, I'm just giving you a lot of food for thought.